The Rue du Coq d'Or, Paris, 7 in the morning. A succession of furious, choking yells from the street. Madame Moncey, who kept the little hotel opposite mine, had come out onto the pavement to address a lodger on the 3rd floor. Her bare feet were stuck into sabots, and her grey hair was streaming down. Madame Moncey, "Salope! Salope! How many times have I told you not to squash bugs on the wallpaper? Do you think you bought the hotel, eh? Why can't you throw them out the window like everyone else? Putain, salope!" The woman on the 3rd floor, "Vache!" Thereupon a whole variegated chorus of yells, as windows were flung open on every side and half the street joined in the quarrel. They shut up abruptly 10 minutes later, when a squadron of cavalry rode past and people stopped shouting to look at them. I sketched this scene just to convey something of the spirit of the Rue du Coq d'Or. Not that quarrels were the only thing that happened there. But still, we seldom got through the morning without at least one outburst of this description. Quarrels and the desolate cries of street hawkers, and the shouts of children chasing orange peel over the cobbles, and at night loud singing and the sour reek of the refuse carts, made up the atmosphere of the street. It was a very narrow street, a ravine of tall, leprous houses lurching towards one another in queer attitudes, as though they had all been frozen in the act of collapse. All the houses were hotels and packed to the tiles with lodgers, mostly Poles, Arabs and Italians. At the foot of the hotels were tiny bistros, where you could be drunk for the equivalent of a shilling. On Saturday night about a third of the male population of the quarter was drunk. There was fighting over women, and the Arab navvies who lived in the cheapest hotels used to conduct mysterious feuds and fight them out with chairs and occasionally revolvers. At night the policemen would only come through the street 2 together. It was a fairly rackety place, and yet, amid the noise and dirt, lived the usual respectable French shopkeepers, bakers and laundresses and the like, keeping themselves to themselves and quietly piling up small fortunes. It was quite a representative Paris slum. My hotel was called the Hôtel des Trois Monnaies. It was a dark, rickety warren of 5 stories, cut up by wooden partitions into 40 rooms. The rooms were small, arid, inveterately dirty, for there was no maid, and Madame F., the patron, had no time to do any sweeping. The walls were as thin as matchwood, and to hide the cracks they had been covered with layer after layer of pink paper, which had come loose and housed innumerable bugs. Near the ceiling, long lines of bugs marched all day like columns of soldiers, and at night came down ravenously hungry, so that one had to get up every few hours and kill them in hecatombs. Sometimes when the bugs got too bad, one used to burn sulphur and drive them into the next room, whereupon the lodger next door would retort by having his room sulphured and drive the bugs back. It was a dirty place, but homelike, for Madame F. and her husband were good sorts. The rent of the rooms varied between 30 and 50 francs a week. The lodgers were a floating population, largely foreigners who used to turn up without luggage, stay a week and then disappear again. They were of every trade: cobblers, bricklayers, stonemasons, navvies, students, prostitutes, rag pickers. Some of them were fantastically poor. In one of the attics there was a Bulgarian student who made fancy shoes for the American market. From 6 to 12 he sat on his bed, making a dozen pairs of shoes and earning 35 francs. The rest of the day he attended lectures at the Sorbonne. He was studying for the church, and books of theology lay face down on his leather-strewn floor. In another room lived a Russian woman and her son, who called himself an artist. The mother worked 16 hours a day, darning socks at 25 centimes a sock, while the son, decently dressed, loafed in the Montparnasse cafes. One room was let to 2 different lodgers, one a day worker and the other a night worker. In another room a widower shared the same bed with his 2 grown-up daughters, both consumptive. There were eccentric characters in the hotel. The Paris slums are a gathering place for eccentric people. People who have fallen into solitary half-mad grooves of life and given up trying to be normal or decent. Poverty frees them from ordinary standards of behavior, just as money frees people from work. Some of the lodgers in our hotel lived lives that were curious beyond words. There were the Rogiers, for instance, an old ragged dwarfish couple who plied an extraordinary trade. They used to sell postcards on the Boulevard Saint-Michel. The curious thing was that the postcards were sold in sealed packets as pornographic ones but were actually photographs of the chateau on the Loire. The buyers did not discover this till too late, and of course never complained. The Rogiers earned about 100 francs a week, and by strict economy managed to be always half-starved and half-drunk. The filth of their room was such that one could smell it on the floor below. According to Madame F., neither of the Rogiers had taken off their clothes for 4 years. Or there was Henry, who worked in the sewers. He was a tall, melancholy man with curly hair, rather romantic-looking in his long sewerman's boots. Henry's peculiarity was that he did not speak, except for the purposes of work, literally for days together. Only a year before he had been a chauffeur in good employ and saving money. One day he fell in love, and when the girl refused him, he lost his temper and kicked her. On being kicked, the girl fell desperately in love with Henry, and for a fortnight they lived together and spent 1,000 francs of Henry's money. Then the girl was unfaithful. Henry planted a knife in her upper arm and was sent to prison for 6 months. As soon as she had been stabbed, the girl fell more in love with Henry than ever, and the two made up their quarrel and agreed that when Henry came out of jail, he should buy a taxi and they would marry and settle down. But a fortnight later, the girl was unfaithful again, and when Henry came out, she was with child. Henry did not stab her again. He drew out all his savings and went on a drinking bout that ended in another month's imprisonment. After that, he went to work in the sewers. Nothing would induce Henry to talk. If you asked him why he worked in the sewers, he never answered, but simply crossed his wrists to signify handcuffs, and jerked his head southward, towards the prison. Bad luck seemed to have turned him half-witted in a single day. Or there was R., an Englishman, who lived 6 months of the year in Putney with his parents, and 6 months in France. During his time in France he drank 4 litres of wine a day, and 6 litres on Saturdays. He had once travelled as far as the Azores, because the wine there is cheaper than anywhere in Europe. He was a gentle, domesticated creature, never rowdy or quarrelsome, and never sober. He would lie in bed till midday, and from then till midnight he was in the corner of the bistro, quietly and methodically soaking. While he soaked he talked, in a refined, womanish voice, about antique furniture. Except myself, R. was the only Englishman in the quarter. Life in the quarter. Our bistro, for instance, at the foot of the Hôtel des Trois Monnaies, a tiny brick-floored room, half underground, with wine-sodden tables, and a photograph of a funeral inscribed Crédit et Mort. and red-sashed workmen carving sausage with big jackknives, and Madame F., a splendid Auvergnat peasant woman with the face of a strong-minded cow, drinking Malaga all day for her stomach, and games of dice for aperitif, and songs about les prés et les framboises, and about Madelon, who said, "Comment époiser un soldat? Moi qui aime tous les régiments," and extraordinarily public love-making. Half the hotel used to meet in the bistro in the evenings. I wish I could find a pub in London a quarter as cheery. One heard queer conversations in the bistro. As a sample, I give you Charlie, one of the local curiosities. Charlie was a youth of family and education, who had run away from home and lived on occasional remittances. Picture him very pink and young, with the fresh cheeks and soft brown hair of a nice little boy, and lips excessively red and wet, like cherries. His feet are tiny, his arms abnormally short, his hands dimpled like a baby's. He has a way of dancing and capering while he talks, as though he were too happy and too full of life to keep still for an instant.
Monsieur, it is the last drink for you. You are as pissed as a nuet.
It is 3 in the afternoon, and there is no one in the bistro except Madame F. and 1 or 2 men who are out of work. But it is all the same to Charlie whom he talks to, so long as he can talk about himself. He declaims like an orator on a barricade, rolling the words on his tongue and gesticulating with his short arms. His small, rather piggy eyes glitter with enthusiasm. He is, somehow, profoundly disgusting to see. He is talking of love, his favourite subject.
Avec ce mot de ton premier aveu, je reste sans volonté, je ne peux pas résister. Quand tu me dis très tendrement, chérie, quand tu me dis très doucement, chérie, je recherche au fond de moi-même ce que je préfère en toi. Et je crois bien surtout que j'aime le charme de ta voix. Quand tu me dis très tendrement, chérie.
There were plenty of other people who lived lives just as eccentric as these. Monsieur Jules, the Romanian, who had a glass eye and would not admit it. Fure, the Linnæusen stonemason. Roucault the miser. He died before my time, though. Old Laurent, the rag merchant, who used to copy his signature from a slip of paper he carried in his pocket. It would be fun to write some of their biographies, if one had time. I am trying to describe the people in our quarter, not for the mere curiosity, but because they are all part of the story. Poverty is what I am writing about, and I had my first contact with poverty in this slum. The slum, with its dirt and its queer lives, was first an object lesson in poverty, and then the background of my own experiences. It is for that reason that I try to give some idea of what life was like there. These true cases from the early 20th century are taken from the newspaper archives. As always, I endeavour to find cases that are not the well-known ones that do the rounds constantly. A 19-year-old socialite disappears in broad daylight. Her father searches for decades to no avail. A 30-year-old typist who was friends with the high-ups in the Australian government disappears after telling friends and family that she was going on a quick spying trip. Rumours abound that she had many lovers and was pregnant by one of them. A 52-year-old businesswoman waves goodbye to her husband and daughter and is never seen again. An 8-year-old schoolgirl is out doing errands and disappears into thin air. A 20-year-old woman disappears from a ship during the night. Did she jump or was she pushed?
That's not something I do. I don't even know you.
A handsome and rich young man disappears after leaving his workplace in the evening. Why would a young man with immense wealth just walk away from it? Or did he? These cases and more will be examined in this presentation. In this continuation of the series, I feature 3 cases from the infamous asylum. Locked behind walls built to contain both violence and madness, the patients of Broadmoor left behind more than medical notes and prison records. They left fragments of lives interrupted, moments of obsession, despair, delusion, jealousy, grief, and sometimes terrible acts that changed everything. Tonight we open the casebooks and listen to these long silent voices once more. These are not legends or sensational tales, but true stories of men who found themselves confined within one of Britain's most infamous institutions. The names may be fading, but their echoes remain. Plus, I feature a well-documented haunting linked to one of the cases. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that, my dears. I don't know why, but for the last 6 months, I've been wanting to cover a passage from George Orwell's Down and Out in Paris and London, and I finally did it. I know it's not to everyone's taste, but I do hope some of you enjoyed it. If I got a positive enough response from my audience, then I might consider more passages or another passage from the book. It all depends on how much feedback, how much positive feedback I get about it, as to whether I would continue at a later date another passage from that fascinating book. Because it's not only a novel, but it is also an accurate historical representation of Paris at that time. I got my 1969 copy when I was about 19, and I read it in that year about 4 times. I was really got into it. I didn't know much about George Orwell at the time. I hadn't even read 1984 at that stage, but this was the first novel by him. I do remember many years ago reading that his sister was quite annoyed with him because I think he came from a middle-class family, and she just thought he was playing at being working class by, joining the tramps at the Doss House in London, and going to Paris and working in the kitchens and his escapades there. But life is an adventure, and that's what he wanted to do, and he got some great experiences out of it. It must be nice, though, at the end of it to be able to go back to your middle-class lifestyle, to be able to escape the drudgery that the poor people have to live day in and day out. Yes, looking at this image on the screen I found, and it would indicate that the French were eating rats. So I did a little bit of research, and I found out that during the siege of 1870, I think that was the Prussian siege, the French were eating rats at that time. They were starving. But I've also found something else. It's quite possible that they're still eating rats today as a delicacy. Let's have a look at this. So I have found 2 websites here that discusses the topic of eating rats. This one is from this website medium.com, The Cheese Woman, or What Did People Eat and Not Eat During the Siege of Paris. So apparently chocolate was easy to find. That's a surprise. They weren't doing without chocolate. Here in France, the 1870 to 1871 siege of Paris by the Prussians is largely forgotten, except for one thing. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. We ate rat. We ate rat, and why not? I'm not going to read this whole account. If you want to read it, please let me know, because I may forget the link. And if you don't let me know in the comment section, I'll probably forget to post the link. But if you let me know, I will. I usually keep them open as a bookmark for a while. And if I don't hear from anybody, then I delete it. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. If you want to have a look at that, you can. But she's just saying what things were available. It's written by a lady, by the way. Saying what things are available. Wine, coffee, jams and sweets were also still in good supply. Or at least they had wine and coffee. Not too bad, is it? Dried goods like rice and even pasta were able to be found. And then there were canned goods. Canned goods were easily obtained in Paris, but the average Parisian didn't buy or consume them very often. I wonder why. Was it because they didn't like it, or was it because they couldn't afford it? This made it easier for Americans, who were more accepting and maybe more used to these preserved foods. And maybe it was a matter of taste. They didn't want it. But then again, they would prefer to eat rat and snail and frog. Interesting. By the way, I've eaten snails, escargot. I tried it once in Australia, in a French restaurant. They served it in these large snail shells, much larger than the normal common or garden snail, and it was served with a garlic butter sauce. Very nice. It was very nice, I must say. They were very tender. I have heard if they're not cooked properly, then it's like sort of eating chewing gum, or very, very tough. But mine were good. I wouldn't try frog, I must say. That would, that just doesn't really appeal to me, and the way they present it. But even in Switzerland, not that long ago, more than 100 years ago, probably still after that, there was a lot of poverty in the Alps, and people were also eating snails because there was just no food. And to this day, there is a tradition in some parts of Switzerland where they will eat dog, and they're allowed to hunt them in that certain part where it's the tradition. Let me have a look. So this is quite bad. Apparently they had very bad bread. Bread continued to be available throughout the siege, but other things were added to it instead of flour. I've read that by the end of the siege, even hay was being used. The bad bread became so emblematic that souvenir shadow boxes were sold after the siege that included lists of important battles alongside the price of different types of vegetables, and a small piece of actual bread from the time. You have to excuse my voice. We've got the grasses at the moment affecting my hay fever. Bear with me. So there we have the cute little shadow box there with obviously some commemorative coins or medals, and a bit of the bread of the time. Can you see that? See if I can do a close-up of that. Look at that. It's got the bread of the time. Ha! Very interesting. So I will leave that with you. Very interesting account of the diet at the time. Dogs as well, and horse, whatever they could get hold of. And apparently the butcher shops were selling rat along with the other items. These, I guess they were especially bred rats and not the sewer rats that the poor people might have to eat. So this is from Reddit, none other. It says that rats are sometimes eaten in parts of France. In Bordeaux, there is a recipe that calls for the use of alcoholic rats who live in wine cellars. The rats are skinned and eviscerated, brushed with a thick sauce of olive oil and crushed shallots, and grilled over a fire of broken wine barrels. My goodness. So then we look at the comments section. Someone says the reason for the use of alcoholic rats, as is my understanding, is that these rats feed almost exclusively on pomace, the solids removed during juice extraction. As these rats are not consuming every random filthy scrap imaginable, nor are they inclined to seek out other food, minimizing their transit through sewage, etc. They are exceptionally clean with a very consistent meat quality. I never knew this, did you? How very interesting. Huh. Someone's left a rather witty comment there. And somebody says here, though, well, as a French living in Bordeaux for over 20 years, I can assure you that I've never heard of such a thing, and the whole concept of alcoholic rats seems improbable at best. So, any French people out there who happen upon my video, could you let me know if this recipe in Bordeaux is still going today? Are people eating rats? Very interesting. I did hear a couple of years ago that in certain parts of Africa where it's really poor and they can't afford chicken, they will also fry rats and eat it. I mean, if you're hungry, you're going to eat it. If you're really that hungry, you'll eat a lot. You will. But we're just not used to doing that in our countries. But I'm sure if it's prepared in a good sauce. So what I would like to know is, what is the most adventurous thing you have ever eaten? And I think mine was the snails. I don't think I would try them again. Yeah, no, I don't think I would. But it was an evening out with a lot of people, and they convinced me. It wasn't bad, as I said, it wasn't bad, but I don't think I would have it again. But generally, I'm quite adventurous when it comes to eating. I will try anything for the first time. Well, not everything, but a lot of things. So I'd like to know, what would be the most adventurous thing you would eat? And in your youth, did you ever find yourself in straitened circumstances? Were you living in a cheap accommodation? Please tell me any amusing stories you have from that time, if you have any. The part in Down and Out in Paris and London where the person had their room fumigated, and of course all the bugs would go to the next person's room. I had that very experience. My long-time viewers would know that I lived in a converted mansion in Sydney, and the walls were hollow, and of course the hot, humid Sydney climate in summer, the bugs, it was a problem with the cockroaches. Some of them were that big you could ride on their backs. Horrible looking things. And eventually, of course, enough would be enough, and then I would call in pest control, and they would fumigate, and all the cockroaches would run through the walls to the next apartments. And they would also get the message, and they would do the same thing. It was a cycle. They got in everywhere, these cockroaches. There was the African ones and the German ones. For those of you who don't know, the African ones are the large ones, and the German ones are the little brown ones. And the African ones, although they're more unsightly, they're the ones who don't really infest a place. They just tend to come and visit. They'll pop in to see what you have. It's the German ones. They're the problem. They are the infestation, and they spread more bacteria. Sorry if I'm grossing any of you out. Anyway, I digress. Yes, so that is one thing that I do not miss from my bohemian days was the cockroaches, now that we live in our hermetically sealed Swiss apartment. Don't have any here, thank goodness. There was one thing I did not like about Australia was the spiders and cockroaches and snakes. Saw plenty in my time. Don't miss them at all. Anyway, so I'd love to hear your story of your first apartment. If you have any unusual or funny memories of your first apartment building, or the actual people who lived in the building, your neighbours. I could tell you many stories about the ones in my apartment building, but I will save that for another time. My dear friends, I think I've babbled on enough. It's now time for you to babble on and tell me your wonderful stories. Take care, my friends. God bless and goodbye.